So let's start. We are few, but the good ones. So you are Sophiko. Sophiko. Okay. The abstracts here, Sophiko. So Sophiko will be talking about the role of digital delivery of higher education in public policy for the resocialization of convicts. And do you have a PowerPoint?
Yeah, I have. I try to. Yeah. Okay.
And you can put it larger?
Sorry, I can't see because of my. Yeah, where is it?
Look here.
Yeah, it's here.
Good. Okay, so let's start. And you can have all the time you want because if no one else comes, but let's keep it to...
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. Sorry for interrupting, but I will also be presenting. I will be presenting online.
Oh, but you are
Daniela
not in this session.
I'm not in the session. Is it panel 3?
Panel 3.
Let me just check my program. Sorry.
I'm sorry, but you're not on my list. But
okay, maybe there was a problem with the Zoom link. I'm sorry.
Daniela Nascimento is not here.
Panel 3, yes. Panel 3, Wednesday, July 2nd. Daniela Nascimento and José Manuel Pureza. Redefining course of changing international system, right? This is the name of the panel.
The panel is called Liberal Degradation, Media and Changing Nature of World Politics. Panel 3.
So there was a change in the program that I received. I will check the correct one. Sorry. There was probably a problem with a change in the program. I will check.
Anyway, okay. I don't know.
Thank you anyway.
And shouldn't I have the diplomas to show the certificates?
Table.
Okay.
I give.
Good. Thank you. So let's start with Sophiko Tabatadze. Okay. Thank you.
Hello, everyone again. My name is Sophiko Tabatadze. As you know, I'm from Georgia. And my presentation topic is the real role of digital delivery of higher education in public policy for the resocialization of convicts, based on study conducted in penitentiary institution in Georgia. What is the problem? Okay. In Georgian prisons, convicts can access higher education in too many ways. The first one is same digital service, correspondence learning format. And in this setup, convicts study with the help of a coordinator, but they don't have direct contact with university lecturers or other stuff. The second one is full digital service called Digital University. In this case, convicts attend classes through online platforms like Zoom and participate in lectures in digital. The topic of my research is relevant for several reasons. Providing higher education is one of the tools of resocialization of convicts. The opportunity to receive higher education is fundamental right of every person. It is important for countries to have effective policy for resocialization of convicts in order to reduce pressure of state budgets. There are almost no research paper on the importance of higher education and its delivery forms in the policy of resocialization of convicts, both in Georgia and other countries. The aim of my research was to study the state's policy regarding the organization of providing higher education in the process of resocialization of convicts in the penitentiary system based on comparison of some digital and full digital forms of learning. And my research question was, first one, how did the inclusion of convicts in the digital university on the one hand and correspondence studies on the other hand contribute to the process of resocialization and rehabilitation? And second one was, what are the barrier factors in providing higher education to convicts? And for the research, I used two theoretical framework. First one was criminological framework. This theory focused on why people commit a crime and what the response should be: punishment or rehabilitation. In particular, social challenge in society, for example, barriers to education contribute to crime activity. The second theoretical framework was desistance theory. This theory involves stopping crime behavior or other antisocial behavior by promoting prosocial behavior. For example, supporting convict with future employment and education. I use the qualitative research method as a research methodology. In particular, in deep interview, we are conduct with male students of both form of study, university lectures, and staff. And empirical materials and thematic legislative framework enforced in Georgian, we are studied through content analysis. Okay. The importance of resocialization is outlined in Georgian legislation, which defines its role in the rehabilitation process. In this context, correspondence learning supports resocialization in two key ways. First one is help a convict use their time more productively. Second, participating in correspondence learning has in some cases allowed convicts students to transfer to prison with better living condition. When students describe the correspondence learning format, they use the following terms. For example, confusing process, low ability to understand the material, lack of communication, and other similar statements. And the role of digital university in the process of resocialization of convicts is characterized by the following aspects. First one is the respect for the convict, other people, take a responsibility, creation of a healthy, normal psychological atmosphere among convicts in the penitentiary institutes, raising the level of education of the convicts. And the last one is preparation of the convict for release. When the students describe study forms, they use some words. For example, significant experience, interesting projects, effective, social, responsible, and etc. I want to discuss various circumstances providing higher education to convicts in prison. In this case of the same digital services, barriers are delayed access to learning materials and old materials. Sometimes they are useless. It's almost impossible to analyze learning materials without communicating with the lectures. Unobjective grades of students by lectures. In the case of full digital service, convict students face several barriers. First one is lack of training resource, shortage of staff in the penitentiary system, and lack of skills of lecturers to work with vulnerable groups. And across both learning formats, convict students face several common challenges while pursuing university studies, in particular due to prison regime, lack of time for study, and second one is lack of group classes and practical classes. And I want to show you qualitative dates that show prisoner students study better with a full digital service. Special the average score of prisoners in correspondence learning in 19.1, while in digital services 77 points. Moreover, in same digital learning, 81% of prisoner students earn all credits of semester study credits, while the remaining 19% earn only partial. The findings of the research are involvement in digital university helped or is helping convict students. It improves their communication with outside world, boosts their self-confidence, give them access to higher education, and supports their reintegration into society. It's also encourages them to take responsibility for their actions and contribute to change public attitudes by showing a more positive human side of their journey. Convict students using the correspondence education format received high education to increase their self-confidence and receive education. The attitude of lecturers involved in digital university towards the convicts as a phenomenon changed after the lecturers communicate with the students. The change is based on getting to know the personal characters of convict students. In the correspondence education process, the attitude of lecturers towards the convicts as a phenomenon changed after the lecturers become convinced of students' education and competence. And summary is, in conclusion, it can be said, involvement or access to the digital university program compared to correspondence learning format contribute more to the process of resocialization of convicts. Participation in this educational program forced convicts to think about their lives, to make new choice. They gained more control over their lives. Accordingly, the provision of this full digital service by the state service to support the convicts of support the reduce of criminal and antisocial behavior of convicts. That's all. This source used. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, very well. Thank you for the presentation. I have some questions, but please, if you would like to speak up, please do.
Yes. Can I? I'm sorry, I'm back. Sorry to disturb. But I was just in contact with a member of the organization, and there was a problem, misunderstanding with my presentation. And I was asked to present in this paper, in this panel, if it's possible.
Okay.
Would that be possible?
Yes, because we don't have anybody else.
So if I mean, the topic is a little bit different, but if you don't mind, I would use the opportunity also to present the paper in this panel.
I think it's possible, yes, but let's wait for someone from the organization.
Okay, thank you.
Anyway, questions about this program that Sophiko showed us about? I have a question. Are there results that you can show about prisoners getting out and getting employment? Are they employable when they get out, or are they still considered criminals and no one will recognize their value after studying?
For example, some person changed their attitude after getting know this person. For example, lecturer, because they think convicts are bad person always. But when they know their students, they think more positively convicts as a phenomenon. But they're always low ability to make the employed, unfortunately.
Yes, because it would be interesting to get statistics on that kind of improvement on their lives.
This research conduct in prison.
Yes, not after.
Not after. Only prison. Not after. I have not possibility to conduct research outside prison because it's necessary to more resource for interview, for gather some materials, and that's all.
Okay, so it will be your next project.
Maybe.
Yes. Okay. Anybody else want to make some observations? So let's move on to Daniela Nascimento. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so you may begin, and please let us know who you are and what you're talking about, because you're not in our list.
I will. I don't know if you can see my screen. I think I'm sharing my screen. So,
yes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Sorry for crashing this panel, but I was really convinced it was my slot. So my name is Daniela Nascimento. I'm a professor, associate professor at University of Coimbra in the Department of International Relations. This is a joint paper with a colleague also from the university, José Manuel Pureza, who is a full professor in the same department. And we have been doing research on issues related to humanitarianism, critical studies on humanitarianism. And our paper is related to a discussion on the evolution of humanitarian action with a specific focus on lessons learned from the case of the United Nations Refugee Agency for the Palestinian Territories, UNRWA. So the research focus of this paper is basically analyzing the evolution of neoclassical humanitarianism to neoliberal humanitarianism through the experience of UNRWA in Gaza. The central research question that is in the paper, and this is a draft paper that we've been developing, is how does UNRWA's experience shed light on the ongoing relevance of classical humanitarian principles in a position or versus a version of a more integrated approach to humanitarianism, which has been developed around this idea of the humanitarian development and peace nexus when applied to contemporary conflicts like the one we are unfortunately seeing happen in Gaza, especially since the Hamas attacks of October 23. And of course, the current crisis context is important. The attacks by Hamas in October 23 and the subsequent war in Gaza have intensified attacks against UNRWA, making it a primary target for elimination. There has also been systematic targeting in terms of the funding of UNRWA, in terms especially by the United States, already with the Trump in the first administration, and now increasingly and reinforced in the current administration, but also legislative prohibitions by the Israeli government, physical attacks on facilities, on humanitarian workers, and of course accusations of political bias that reveal deeper tensions within the work of UNRWA. So in our review, in terms of the theoretical significance of the research, we believe that UNRWA's challenges kind of illuminate broader debates about the importance of humanitarian principles versus political integration and a more comprehensive approach to humanitarian action. And that's the point of start of the paper. In terms of the theoretical framing, we of course rely on a framing that resorts to the evolution of both humanitarian discourse and practice throughout the decades. We don't have much time, but of course it all starts through a focus on the so-called classical approach to humanitarianism, the so-called Dunantist approach, that takes us back to the mid-19th century with the heritage of Henri Dunant. But in a nutshell, classical approach to humanitarian action relies on core principles of action, humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence, with a focus on needs-based assistance and protection through neutrality. So the idea that humanitarian organizations, through this classical approach, they perform their work through neutrality, so not taking sides in the conflict that is kind of sustaining a specific crisis. The evolution of classical humanitarianism throughout the decades led to some criticism in relation to neutrality specifically. And so in the 90s, up until the 2000s, a new conception of humanitarianism emerged called or named New Humanitarianism, which is very different from the classical one. It is clearly rights-based, politically engaged, and very focused on addressing root causes of conflict and transforming power relations. So there is a shift in terms of the overall goals of the work and the purpose of humanitarian organizations and humanitarian action that should no longer be relying on immediate relief, short-term relief to the victims. And then in this last period from the 2000s until today, we would say, there has been this emergence of a more neoliberal humanitarianism. And this is when the so-called humanitarian peace and development nexus emerges, very much focused on an integrated, fused approach of humanitarian peace and development objectives through coordination and complementary intervention. So the lines between these different types of intervention get blurred for the sake of a more integrated approach to humanitarian action. This idea that we should not be defining too clear borders between the different types of action. It should all be merged and integrated in a more comprehensive approach that could combine short-term, medium-term, and longer-term objectives to humanitarian organizations. Of course, the debate at some point ends up stressing the value of core humanitarian principles. And just for the sake of clarity, we do not argue that or defend the idea that we should go back to the basics and the classical approach to humanitarianism, but we do want to stress out the importance of core fundamental principles when it comes to addressing humanitarian crises. And here, stating very clearly what these principles mean. Humanity, meaning preventing and alleviating human suffering from war or from natural disaster. Neutrality, meaning a refrain from taking sides in hostilities or engaging in political or other type of controversies, aiming at protecting the victims of humanitarian crisis and assuring access to these victims. The idea of impartiality in the sense that there should be no discrimination between victims. Every victim deserves assistance, so impartiality grants this commonality between the victims, regardless of the sides in which they are. And finally, independence, which of course relies significantly on the material dimension of independence, the idea that there is a level of economic, financial autonomy by the organizations that should be maintained. The core of our research relies on this discussion on the humanitarian peace and development nexus. This nexus seeks to bridge, at least in theory, to bridge humanitarian response, peace building and development through coordinated complementary interventions aimed at addressing root causes of crisis rather than merely the symptoms of those crises. There has been the identification and the reliance of this nexus on some key characteristics, the long-term perspective aimed at addressing cultural structural causes, the rights-based approach focusing on transforming power relations and addressing inequalities, a focus on political engagement, so explicitly acknowledging and engaging with political dimensions of the crisis, so the idea that the crises do not occur in a vacuum, an integrated programming, meaning that there should be coordination across humanitarian peace and development sectors, and a very significant emphasis on coherence, this idea that we should ensure complementarity between different types of interventions. And this is very much in line with the relatively old liberal peace debate, this idea that liberal peace should be based on some sort of a mantra of economic and political liberalization with longer term objectives. So we argue that this nexus is very much embedded in the neoliberal approach to peace, development, and of course, it kind of gets embedded also in the debate on humanitarianism. There have been, of course, many tensions and critiques resulting from this evolution, and especially from the implementation of the Nexus agenda. The costs of politicization are clear and significant, and we would identify a couple of them, mostly related with the risk of instrumentalization of aid. The integration of humanitarian aid with political objectives leads or may lead to co-option of aid for non-humanitarian purposes, and that is a problem from the point of view of the victims' needs. So the result is that humanitarian action becomes a tool of foreign policy rather than an expression of universal solidarity towards the victims. Another critique relates to the compromise protection dimension. So the idea that humanitarianism should also protect the victims is blurred with this nexus because politicization compromises humanitarian access and increases security risks. And there have been lots of debates and discussion and work developed in relation to this so-called bunkerization of aid and increased targeting of aid workers. It's not random that in the last decades, the number of attacks to or directed to humanitarian workers have increased significantly. And this has, of course, to be read as a consequence of this increasing politicization and instrumentalization of humanitarian aid, of humanitarian organizations, and humanitarianism more broadly. So we are kind of confronted with this paradox of protection. Classical principles, in particular neutrality, were designed to provide protection, both victims and aid workers, by maintaining this perception that these organizations are not threatening actors. From the moment political engagement steps in, it undermines this protective function. And I think we can see that very clearly in the case of UNRWA in Gaza, as I will explain very quickly in a minute. So there are a few concerns that also add to this. The loss of distinctive humanitarian character and moral authority, an increased vulnerability to violence and targeting of humanitarian organizations, an erosion of humanitarian space and operational access, and reduced effectiveness in complex emergency contexts. So the case of UNRWA, in our view, is particularly relevant for this discussion. If we think about the origins and the founding context of UNRWA, it was created in 1949 in response to an inability to implement the UN General Assembly Resolution 194 that would establish repatriation rights for approximately 7,000 Palestinian refugees that were expelled during the 1948 war. And the mandate of UNRWA is somehow contradictory from the start. It kind of combines a minimalist approach of humanitarianism, so preventing conditions of starvation and distress for the Palestinian refugees, so clearly classical emergency relief provision mandates, but also combined with a more longer-term mandate to promote conditions for peace and stability, kind of linking to this more structural intervention and development purposes. So this contradiction, in our review, resulted from this compromise that was attempted in the immediate aftermath of the Nakba between a political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and an immediate response to the clearly deteriorating humanitarian situation of the refugees. The evolution of UNRWA's operational work from relief to development to neoliberalism is also very clear. In the 50s, very clearly related or focused on refugee assistance, and then increasingly assuming medium longer term objectives that are organized in 5 core operational domains: education, health services, relief and social services, and also microcredit programs, which were, of course, a result of the needs of the times, especially taking into consideration the long duration of the Palestinian issue. And this has somehow led to this idea that UNRWA has become a political actor, very much linked to this idea of construction of a Palestinian refugee identity. And here we rely a little bit on Feldman's idea that humanitarian minimalism focused on rations and tents, so food, relief, shelter, constituted an essential instrument in constructing refugees as political actors. This idea that the UNRWA has become also the reflection and the illustration of this paradox, this Dunantist paradox, a classical humanitarian minimalism becomes an instrument of political mobilization and identity preservation, while maintaining a focus on longer-term objectives and sustaining the cause for the Palestinians way beyond the mere provision of humanitarian aid, of relief aid in the short term. So there is a political significance in this move, and the agency continuity supports the strategy of not forgetting displaced status at the same time as providing the necessary conditions or more structural conditions for the Palestinians to endure. The case of UNRWA is also interesting in terms of the debate because it also reflects some sort of a neoliberal turn. And the neoliberal term is very much focused on what we identify as three core ideas: containment, so containment of the crisis where they are, avoiding the spillover of those crises, resilience of the victims of this crisis. So the victims become responsible for their own vulnerability, and entrepreneurship. So this idea that since we do not have the capacity to structurally solve this vulnerability of the victims of the crisis, and especially the case of the Palestinians in Gaza, then we have to make sure that they manage to overcome their vulnerability by being resilient and entrepreneurs. There is a fundamental shift in this logic. So that's the transformation from the idea of relief, short-term relief, to longer-term capacity to overcome vulnerability. And this is, in our view, somehow visible in some of the neoliberal characteristics in UNRWA's programming. A containment strategy to keep refugees in temporary host locations rather than addressing displacement root causes, an entrepreneurial focus, an individual responsibility, so making refugees responsible for escaping deprivation conditions, a resilience paradigm, so adapting to the circumstance rather than structural transformation, and of course, market solutions, making sure the private sector can also be engaged and promote economic integration. The critical implication of this is that there is a fundamental shift from collective rights and political solutions towards individual adaptation and market-based response to structural displacement. And we are very critical of that move because we believe it is not sustainable. To conclude, and I'm sorry if I'm taking too long, the October 23 crisis and the systematic targeting of UNRWA is also very relevant. As I mentioned in the beginning, there has been clear moves, political moves to suspend funding to UNRWA based on unsubstantiated allegations. There have been legislation banning UNRWA from operating in the occupied territories. There has been physical targeting of UNRWA's facilities and staff, and has been a very active propaganda campaign against UNRWA workers based on allegations that are not substantiated, that some of the staff from UNRWA has been involved in the attacks of Hamas. And this has become also the basis of a significant change in relation to the capacity of UNRWA to operate. So the main key research findings of the paper are more or less organized in these four ideas. There is a dynamic tension reality. So that rather than an evolutionary progress from old to new humanitarianism, this clearly coexists in continuous tension. So classical principles remain relevant, but integrated programming is also very clear. Classical principles have gained renewed significance but have also increased political targeting. So being neutral is not necessarily a way to be out of targeting from the belligerent parts, especially in the case of Gaza, by the Israeli defense forces. So the UNRWA systematic targeting correlates with political integration. UNRWA's capacity to deliver assistance is continuing despite these constraints, and this demonstrates that classical approaches also remain essential. And there is a clear need to shield humanitarian action from geopolitical interference while maintaining space for principled engagement. So the challenge here is to reconcile protection with longer-term goals. So in our view, UNRWA embodies this fundamental tension between humanitarian minimalism based on principles that provides protection through neutrality and a more developmental maximalism that addresses root causes but increases political vulnerability. Just a final reflection, the struggle, in our view, the struggle for UNRWA survival represents a broader battle for what we call the soul of humanitarianism. Whether it will maintain its foundation in universal human dignity or become fully subordinated to geopolitical calculations is the main question. And the imperative of preserving humanitarian space for defenseless civilian populations becomes central to understanding effective humanitarian action in contemporary conflict. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry if I took too much time.
Okay, thank you, Daniela. It was a very interesting context of the problem the world is facing now with war and humanitarian help. I've just found out that you were supposed to be on panel 1 yesterday at 1:30. And okay, but now then you'll have to ask for your certificate to be sent to.
I will. The first version of the program that I received was today at 9, so that's why.
Okay. So let's move on to our next presenter, Taner Zorbay, who will be speaking about Putin and Habib, religion, sports, and Russian public diplomacy. Please, go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thanks again for the organizers to be participating to organizing this event. And thanks to Lisboa. Yesterday was an interesting day. I tried to discover what you can eat after 9:30 p.m. in the city. So I enjoyed the city, and I might have been one of the crowdest reasons of Lisboa yesterday. Anyway, so I will be presenting hopefully an interesting subject.
You enjoyed your meal.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Taner Zorbay from Middle East University, Ankara, Turkey. And I will be presenting quite popular figures of the time, one from politics and international politics, and the other one is Mr. Putin. And we are going to try to explore the intersection of soft power, religious identity, and national image through the two iconic Russian figures. How long will I have the time?
It's 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So let me start up. Okay. So I will not talk much in detail who is Vladimir Putin or who is going to be. But Vladimir Putin has used sports and public figures to bolster Russia's international image because Mr. Putin, since his arrival to the power at the beginning of 2000s or the 21st century, he has been using many things to empower his seat, to empower Russian, what you call, power to strengthen the country's issue, and sports is being one of them. And on the other hand, Habib Nurmagomedov, he was a devout Muslim. He's a devout Muslim and UFC champion, and he became a soft power tool for Russian diplomacy. So how you can bring them together? Mr. Putin, unlike the former Soviet leaders or Russian leaders, he is using public diplomacy a lot. For instance, he regularly visits the Orthodox Church in Moscow, which is one of the three hegemonic churches of Orthodox world, one being Moscow, the other one being Istanbul, and the other one being Jerusalem. So also he pays visits to the Jewish and Muslim and other religious communities in Russia to show that he is supporting the different faiths and beliefs and religious communities in Russia. Whereas Habib seems to attach to this issue from his as a devoted Muslim, his Muslim identity. Yes, he is a UFC champion. Maybe you heard of it or not. But more than his championship, more than his sportsmanship, he comes to the public figure as a devoted Muslim. So Putin, with a really interesting talent, connects Habib Muslim identity with his sportive abilities in order to increase the Russian image in what you call in the world. So who is Habib Nurmagomedov? He's a national icon. He's a UFC lightweight champion. He has been trained and taught since his childhood, and to the point he came, now he became a sort of a symbolic name in Russian land. On the other hand, he is an ethnic Avar from Dagestan. If you might remember, Dagestan and Chechenistan, or Chechnya, had become a points of troublesome for Putin at the beginning of 2000s. If you remember, in 2007, 2008, the Chechen or Dagestani militants used to or had attacked several military or civilian, especially the military targets in the region. However, Habib never seemed to show an sort of anti-Putin show against in that manner. And as an ethnic Avar from Dagestan, he seemed to be a devoted or not only a devoted Muslim, but also a loyal Russian citizen. On the other hand, Habib became a global symbol of Muslim identity and discipline because the ways he acted, the manner he had, and also the discipline he showed off was seen or was to be used as symbols of Muslim identity and discipline. On the other hand, as Habib became national pride in Russia, Putin uses Habib and his images and his videos, his shows and his sports events all wide in Russia in that sense. On the other hand, we see Habib's life as a sort of a religion and identity match and intertwined in one place. For instance, Habib never escaped or do not leave it to the side that his faith, he always shows up. He never hesitate to pray in the public or would pray with hand and showing or presenting Islamic motives and images around the public. And this, for him, as a matter of pride and his relations with his family, his father, his main trainer, and his loyalty to his family, his loyalty to his religion, it appeals to the Muslim populations inside and outside Russia, because the Muslim minorities or Muslim population in Russia, especially, sees this as a symbol for their Muslimhood. Putin, on the other hand, sees sports as another mean of soft power, and this concrete examples of two of many concrete examples of this became the Sochi Olympics in 2014 and World Cup event in 2018, and Putin used this again to empower the Russian hegemony over the region, and also showing that how strong Russia is, including many ethnic and religious minorities and groups supporting the Russian flag, under Russian flag, supporting the Russian identity, and the measures, the what you call security measures taken during the Sochi and World Cup events should be evaluated separately. Yes. Is there any sound here? Yeah. Well, I mean, you can put in speaking Russian, so you can follow from his. Yeah, yeah.
Да, конечно, что тоже команду, личную картину, не за стороны, но все-таки гражданин России, безразлично нашим гражданам, либо они не находились, чем бы они ни были. Я, конечно, переживаю. Потому что все-таки главный говорил, достойно. Я считаю, что мы одна большая сила. Здесь чего не происходило, нужно дать крайности и допускать, все бы происходило. Все бывает. Сегодня все бывает, но никогда не позволяем себе выходить в какие-то рамки. Но если на нас нападают извне, то, конечно, мы можем так пройти, можем пока. Лучше не давать. Это коммерческий спорт. Но это все-таки спорт. Я не согласен с тем, что считает, что здесь должна соблюдаться
So,
Very well. So, wow. Now, my God, Sandro Tabatadze. Okay. So we have one final presentation. May I speak? Okay. So Sandro Tabatadze is going to talk to us about Georgia between digital democracy and digital authoritarianism. Please 50 minutes, and then we'll have time for some questions.
Hello, everyone. I believe that, okay, my voice doesn't repeat. I'm Sandro Tabatadze. I'm assistant professor from Tbilisi State University, Georgia. And today I will present my paper, Georgia between digital democracy and digital authoritarianism. First of all, I would like to explain the logic behind the research problem. Nowadays, we live in the era of decline of democratic institutions, so we can call the erosion of democratic institution, that it is in a very fast shape. At the same time, we live in the era of the technological development that covers all social aspects of our everyday life. Therefore, there is the issue that the level of democracy or development of democracy or decline of democracy could be somehow linked to the technological development. And the fourth main idea and the logic behind the research is that despite promising efforts to use technological innovations to promote democratic engagement and processes, there are a lot of issues and a lot of examples that instead of digital democracy, we face digital authoritarianism. This is the new system of mass surveillance and control are being developed, and the situation commonly used, as I call already, the digital authoritarianism. So, my paper will mostly use two major working concepts. The first is digital democracy, and the second is digital authoritarianism. There is no shared consensus about the definition about these terms in academia, but I will try to focus the core and main aspects of them. In this paper, I refer digital democracy as the concept when digital technologies are used to enhance and transform democratic processes. It includes the concept of the features like political transparency and accountability, e-participation, e-deliberation, and open government. On the contrary, digital authoritarianism is much more a new concept in social and political sciences, and it means that digital technologies at the same time can be used to erode and undermine democratic processes. And it includes online censorship, surveillance, information manipulation, as well as digital sovereignty. And I'm just giving the co-authors about them. Okay, empirics. Why Georgia matters. I already told you that my presentation will be about Georgia, but not because I'm from there. The idea is that Georgia is situated on the crossroads of the Eastern Europe and the Middle East along the Black Sea. And at the same time, nowadays, Georgia is not only on the geographic crossroad, but on the political and the cultural crossroad as well. So, according to different situations that's happening in this region and in this country particularly, we can see the process from pro-Westernism to strategic uncertainty and from slow democratization to rigid authoritarianism. And from this perspective, from this point of view, it's particularly intriguing and interesting the role of digital democracies in consolidating authoritarian regimes or maybe undermining democratic or eroding democratic systems. I will just briefly outline the research framework. The aim of my research is to identify the mechanisms employed by Georgia and in Georgia in the development of digital authoritarianism. To accomplish this, I used descriptive and instrumental case study as the primary research method. And also I used 3 different pillars of data collection and data analysis, starting with secondary data analysis, followed by analysis of official documents, as well as in-depth interviews, including experts. Up to 10 interviews have been already conducted by me during this research. Okay, we can start about the most important and essential part, starting from the research findings. This study, my study, this paper shows that there are clear signs of digital authoritarianism in Georgia since 2019, so last 6 years, with a significant increase after 2022. Just to shed this point light, after Russia-Ukraine war started, Georgian government decided to shift its foreign policy to become reluctant pro-European, we can say, and even not support Ukraine as much as it was expected by citizens, and also blame Ukraine and the West to drag Georgia in the war. So shift in foreign policy and also having some signs of democratic erosion definitely manifested in digital and digital technology issues. And you see the table from VDEM, Digital Society Project, that illustrates the level of Georgia's government control over political content in digital media, while +4 indicates virtually no control and -4 indicates complete control. And you see the shift that before 2019, it was like more positive outcome. I mean that it was some occurrence that government controlled political content in social media, but it was less than more. But after 2019 and especially after 2022, there is a drastic change. So there is the shift in digital authoritarianism according to the post-national expert poll like Digital Society Project. Also, I decided to make such kind of test, the secondary data analysis. I investigated the relationship between decline in democracy index done by economists, as well as emergence of digital authoritarianism coming from this digital society project I already mentioned. So there is one very interesting outcome I can share with you, that before 2020, there was no major shifts in terms of digital control on social media and so on. And there is no vivid correlation between the level of democracy and the signs of the digital authoritarianism done by the government. But after 2020, the higher the decline in democracy level, the higher the examples and the chance, the probability that the government makes online censorship on political content in social media. But not to judge the book only by its cover, I made also content analysis of official documents as well as interviews. And I will show the examples, so how digital authoritarianism is manifested in Georgia before 2022 and after 2022. So information manipulations like trolls and bots were, in both cases, there were over 500 such cases. However, after 2022, the number has increased and significantly become more systematic. I believe that nowadays in every country, never mind it's a consolidated democracy or not, information manipulation is our everyday life, including bots, trolls, and fake news. But in Georgia, after 2022, the number made 3 times as big and more. It's interesting that before 2022 in Georgia, there was no institutionalization of digital surveillance. But after 2022, the government's large-scale producement of facial recognition cameras for protest members, protest movement members, along with their use as the evidence in court proceedings began in 2024. So it means that nowadays the online digital surveillance is institutionalized by the state itself. And online censorship, that was okay, maybe some rarely occurrence, but that was not the mainstream as it is now after 2022, because it became almost after civil servants were dismissed from their jobs in Georgia, and activists and politicians were fined up to 1,500 euros by courts for making public posts on comments critical of the government for using electronic signatures on public petitions. So this idea that if you make a public petition that it is not in line with the government's policy, or you can post something and the court can punish you by administrative fee, this is the typical sign of digital authoritarianism according to literature as well as practice. So it says that after 2022, Georgia has three major key pillars of digital authoritarianism: information manipulation, along with institutionalization of digital surveillance, as well as the online censorship. Conclusion and the future of the research. The study reveals that in conjunction with the decline of democracy, the erosion of democracy, the hallmarks of digital authoritarianism are becoming increasingly apparent in Georgia. But following the political turnout of 2022, after shifting the foreign policy from pro-Westernist to strategic uncertainty, from slow democratization to rigid authoritarianism, online censorship and digital surveillance have also been solidified with institutional frameworks. But one of the key points is the future of the research. So how it should be enriched by different scholars and so on and so on. I believe that there are three main issues, three major questions that still exist, that still need to be answered. The first is Georgia's sudden shift merely a local phenomenon in terms of digital authoritarianism, or it is a part of a larger global or regional trend? Second, is the application of digital technologies for undemocratic processes a consequence of authoritarianism, or it is a mechanism that supports it? And third one, by what means are the components of digital democracy being dismantled concurrently with the erosion of democratic principles? Because we know that when you have some democratic development, you have also digital democracy, but when democracy erodes, how, why, and if so, how the digital democracy erode as well? Thank you so much.
Very well. So we've had some very different papers, but very interesting. And I'm here as a discussant, so I would just like to make some small comments. I've already asked Sophiko, and regarding that fighter in Russia, propaganda is really a very important tool for every regime, and it seems like that one is being very effective, particularly because Putin was also a martial arts expert, wasn't he? So of course he likes that sport. Of course it shows that person as a symbol. But it's not just a characteristic of Putin's regime. We all have our symbols. Wherever I go and say I'm a Portuguese person, they all shout Cristiano Ronaldo. So we all have our symbols, and we all capitalize on them. It's a propaganda measure, and it's very effective, of course. Regarding Sandro Tabatadze, You've had authoritarian regime before. So you say regarding your next research and questions, I think I'm an historian, so I think you should compare, because how was authoritarian regime before controlling their citizens when there was no digital communication? But it was there strongly, but it was a very strong control of the people. And now there's a new type of control. Is it better? Is it worse? Is it more effective? Is it? Because the earlier one was very effective.
So the earlier, you mean the Soviet?
Soviet
Yeah,
regime.
one. Yeah.
It was very effective, and it was probably more effective before. People would not even dare
Yeah.
speak up. And now people speak up and then they are punished for it. But I would also like to compare it. It's not just a Georgian thing. I don't feel that in Portugal. I don't feel that in Europe. Probably it's there, but it's not very visible, not very. But now I know that if we go to the United States, they check our mobile phones for whatever we have there, and they can say that we cannot enter the United States. So even in that country, which was supposed to be the paradigm of democracy and everything, even there's authoritarian control of digital things. So yes, I think there's a democratic backlash, and we should actually fight it and elect other governments that aren't using that type of tool. But let me hear you.
Yeah, I totally agree with this issue for sure. So it could be a long because this project is the part of our project with my colleagues we are doing about the digital democracy and political parties in Georgia. And also we will cover the whole historical development starting from the Democratic Republic. But there is one issue that you mentioned, very important thing, that you should elect governments who are not doing it. The major problem is that if the level of digital authoritarianism is so high, to say it, just say very manipulatively, you can't do it, because if there is no free and fair election in the system, so digital authoritarianism could become just the instrument of any authoritarian government to make system different. So the idea is that, of course, I totally agree with in case of the U.S., but in the U.S. it's more or less, stable democracy. They could change the government, but there are some regions in the world that it's not very easy to do it because there is just no free and fair election. That's all. And according with this logic, and there is no free and fair election, and the level of digital authoritarianism is increasing and increasing, it means that it could start it as the consequence of authoritarianization, but now it's just an instrument. So nowadays, in the era of digital technologies, digital authoritarianism has become just the instrument of every undemocratic government who may be started as the democratic, So that's the issue.
That's scary. So please, we don't have that much time, but we can still answer a few questions. So please.
On the
problem with looking at public diplomacy. Yeah, thank you. Now, the problem of looking at public diplomacy is that it's always seen as a concept which has originated in democracy, right? It's a democratic concept, so it works on the principles of society being free, systems being open, and media being fairly free, right, in societies. But often more than not, we are seeing that this is more or less being used by non-democratic countries, authoritarian countries, if we see. And anyways, any form of a system in authoritarian countries, if it is used to propagate the state, it is propaganda. It is not public diplomacy, right? So how do you see that difference between public diplomacy and propaganda?
Well, I might reflect it to the dynamites. You might use dynamite to make a route or to destroy a castle. So, within the hands of governments of liberal democracies, it becomes a means of empowering the society, increasing the level of democratic life, or increase the quality of the citizens' life. However, coming to the countries with leaders who likes authority, it becomes a stick for the people. So as far as you obey to the central authority, you are valuable, valid citizens of the society. Otherwise, you become persona non grata, right? So that is the question, I guess. For instance, history of this region, the Mediterranean, shows several samples. One day you are the most valuable person of the state, and the next day your head is on the basket. So depends on from where you look for, and maybe the main difference is the your eyeglasses you're using it. Thank you.
Yeah, and to follow this issue is that that's very new phenomenon because in Georgia the institutionalization of such kind of law started only last year, from October maybe. So it's very new phenomenon, but we can say that this is the institutionalization of online surveillance. So it's under by law, so it's not against the law, and this is done by the lawmakers, so it's another issue if they are legitimate or not. It's the political dimension, but in terms of the procedural democracy, this is done. But yeah, but if there is no checks and balances between the judiciary and the parliament, there is nothing. It means that parliament can do anything it wants and nobody will checks and balances it. So
Thank you, everybody. Is done? Yeah, okay, good. I have a question for Dr. Zorbay. Do you think, given the history of that region, Kafkas, Dagestan, you mentioned Chechnya as well, the region, there's a colonial history and legacy and present there as well, right? So I suppose, what do you make of the existing power dynamics between a Habib and a Putin, a Russian mainstream, a Muslim, or very, peripheral subjectivity in that space? Do you think that Habib or someone else in his position could assert some type of agency to do, or they're pushing the agenda of Kremlin, maybe knowingly, maybe unknowingly, but also there is another agenda likely there as well, right? Do you pay attention to that? Do you think that's worth exploring as well? Just like some type of autonomous agency that transcends the politics of Kremlin. And I suppose I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Of course, Putin is called the last Tsar of Russia. So not only his agenda or Kremlin's agenda, but every second of his life is planned and managed. He never leaves the ground to the surprises. And no matter it's a drone attack from Ukraine, nor it's a terrorist attack, he calls them, from Chechnya. So if you look at Chechenistan, or Chechnya, Chechen Republic today, ruled by Kadyrov, a multimillionaire, loyal to Putin, using his own authority in Chechnya and showing to the world that Chechnya is a very happy, tiny republic of Russia. But you go and ask to the Chechens living there, and says people are always sincere, but they always change the matter they're sincere about. So Putin is always sincere about what he does. One thing about his agenda is he is very loyal to Russian identity and Russian dominance. You remember the Russian land in 2014 was signed by Putin in a saloon, in a hall, where the Tsars are getting their crowns. And what is the name of the Putin's party? Russian party, right? So that is the thing. And coming to Habib is a devoted Muslim. Definitely, he's a Muslim, sincere and devoted Muslim. He never quits. He's maybe sort of plan for Putin's agenda. However, this is not a scientific explanation, but he thinks that another Muslim should be loyal to the state also. Maybe, I don't know. Because he never speaks of Russian authority or Putin's authoritarian or rigid regime, or what he did to people in Dagestan and Chechnya in the past. Maybe your question might help us to research for that. Thank you.
Okay, so going back to Daniela Nascimento, I don't know if she's still with us, but there's also this session had a big part of propaganda issues. And regarding Daniela Nascimento's paper on the Gaza humanitarian help, there's also propaganda there when she described that shift from humanitarian to now you're on your own, do your own job, and that the neoliberal shift that Daniela described. So I think that it's important to retain from this session that, yes, propaganda is a powerful tool. It's up to us as educated people to see beyond it, to be able to interpret what is the message that's being provided, and to make our own conclusions, take our own conclusions, and try to be more cynical and not believe everything that people tell us just in the first place. So again, we go back to the education problem. People should be aware. People should not just believe everything they see. And I think that's the message from this. Also, education. She was talking about Sophiko was talking about education in jails. And yes, education is important, so we all should invest more. And it's a feature of authoritarian regimes to disinvest in education. And we are also watching that in Trump's government. He's attacking universities. So it's a tool also to make people less educated, and that disinvestment is very serious, is very dangerous, and clearly that's one of the first things that we all should fight about is education, education, education. So I think this was an interesting session with very different topics, but some points in common. And thank you very much. And now let's go to a break, and let's go on with the conference. Thank you.